Okay, we're going to do it every week. We needed 4 weeks in the books. I'll give you my college football top 12. I'll compare it to the AP a little bit. And then I have two thoughts on Tennessee's win in Norman and Michigan's incredible comeback against USC that it also looked like it was going to have an incredible comeback. All right, number one, Texas, no surprise there. Big win again. The Michigan win. Maybe it's the most impressive. I'm not sure. Not sure how I feel. We'll get to Michigan. Don't worry about it, folks. But they have the best backup QB in college football. Arch Manning, after the game, said pretty funny quote. He said, quote, "The games feel a lot longer. They're a lot longer than high school." I agree with you. I think Tennessee, Oklahoma was 2 hours total just for the first half. That was before we got to halftime. So there you go. No surprises there. Georgia, still number 2 in the AP, number 2 of mine as well. Weird, though. I feel like this happens with voting a lot, where voters will go, what did everybody do? Oh, they started voting Texas number 1 because Georgia had 23 first place votes last week, and then it fell to 13 this week, and they didn't play. So that's always a little weird. They are 2.5-point favorites at Bama for the game of the century of the week. I have Tennessee at number 3. Ohio State's number 3 in the AP. This is strictly about schedule. The NC State win looks like it doesn't mean anything despite expectations of NC State, but just remember they played a freshman QB, CJ Bailey, yesterday at Clemson, or not Saturday. So, hey man, weekend's a whirlwind. So considering they have that, fine, means nothing. But to be that dominant against Oklahoma, against that Oklahoma defense and all the different things, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on this game in a few minutes here. I don't care about the final score. They're number 1 in defense and opposing yards per play. 2.8 yards per play is what they're allowing right now. And they've played a couple of real teams at the very least, right? So I have them 3 because of the schedule of Ohio State. Ohio State may be the best team in the country, but if I'm trying to dig through it, and again, it can kind of contradict itself within the same week or week to week, but it's strictly because Ohio State's schedule, and that's why I have them number 4. The Marshall game, oddly enough, 28-14 at the half. A couple things happened there earlier. You're like, is this kind of a game? And then it wasn't. But the talent on offense for Ohio State, like, even if they aren't perfect, I mean, they don't have to be perfect, especially against a team like Marshall, where, bad play, that got stuff. All right, that didn't work. The big play ability of so many of the guys were just one play, a bad series is completely fixed. Where the Judkins, he went for 86. Trevion Henderson went for 40. Ibuka went for 68. Jeremiah Smith, 53. Tate, a 30-yard play. Just big plays all day for the Buckeyes. Miami's number 5 for me. They're number 7 in the AP. They're number 1 in offense as far as yards per play. It was 22-15 at the half against South Florida, then 28-0 in the second half. So the finals this was actually another one of those. This felt like more of a game than even Ohio State Marshall, because USF's quarterback, Byron Brown, who I don't know how to describe him to you if you haven't watched him play. I just like him. I think you would like him too. He had Bama's defense on skates the first half, and that at the time looked like, what the hell is wrong with Alabama? I think the reality is South Florida is actually kind of like, you got to show up and play these guys, because Alex Gorish, their head coach, like, these guys show up, they're ready to play. Former Tennessee offensive coordinator. The play where Brown got hurt, that play is going to be one of my favorite highlights of the season. He's about to get sacked. A dude, it looks like he's like ready to tap out in a fight, but the guy's on his back, and then he carries that guy, flicks him off of him, and then still gets a gain on the ground. He's just a very odd, tough player at the position, but he's a difference maker. And I've seen it now for a couple halves against 2 top, what do we got? Top 7, top 8 teams in the country. So I have Bama a little bit lower. I feel much better about them after the Wisconsin game. Milroe's the best running quarterback, I think, in college football. We've already talked about the depth and all the clones on defense there. And look, we'll see. We'll see what happens against Georgia here. So it doesn't really matter. I've got Oregon 7. The Boise State game just made me feel so much better after the, I would say the Oregon State game, after the Boise State game, the Idaho stuff. That's fine. Penn State, West Virginia. I have Penn State ahead of Ole Miss just because of the West Virginia game. Aller's number 3 in college football in passer rating. Cam Rising's 1, although he's missed time. Jackson Dart is 2. Aller's completing 71% of his passes. They've had big plays. This past weekend was a stat pad game. The big, tough backup even got in on the action a little bit. So speaking of stat padding, that's where number 9 Ole Miss comes in. Their 4 opponents have a combined 5-10 record. That's Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake, Georgia Southern, and they'll have a month stretch later on this season where they have LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia. That'll be 3 of those games within a month. I have Utah 10. I debated putting them 9 with the win against Oklahoma State. There was a 22-19 final, but it was actually 22-3 in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State's had some weird, ugly games that also have been wins, too, late. 52 carries here. Isaac Wilson, a quarterback. He's all right, but he's not rising. And with Rise, maybe this is, I feel like in a way I'm probably defaulting to giving them still this spot. Just the expectation with this hand injury that Rising's supposed to play. We were told it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. Now here we are again doing this all over. I have Missouri 11. I'm okay with it. Vandy game was tough. The Boston College game was tough. But Boston College is 3-1 with Castellanos at quarterback. We had one life advice that I did not read. It was from a BC Eagles fan that said, "Hey, thanks when you said BC doesn't suck to Todd. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said." And I was like, okay, he was being kind of funny, but I should have been nicer. I should have, because I think Boston College may beat Michigan State this past week. Not that they're killers, but you got to show up and play Boston College. And Vandy isn't Vandy anymore. If you watch the Virginia Tech game and watch Diego Pavia play his transfer from Mexico State, he's just a badass running out. Like, you don't expect him to survive by halftime, and somehow he does. He's listed at 6 feet. Not sure about that one. And look, I know Vandy lost to the Georgia State Panthers, but they're not the doormat you would think they would be. And Mizzou misses 3 field goals. So look, I'm not going to have Missouri outside of the top 12, even if I don't feel the same way about them as I do some other teams that are ahead of them. That brings us to number 12. The AP and coaches poll both have Michigan. I don't know. Michigan's been in my head now for 2 years, right? I haven't been able to get it right with them. But I'm not putting them there. No, I'm not doing it. I can't put USC there, obviously. But I also can't put LSU there because of the USC part of it. Like, even though I don't think the head-to-head should be the defining moment as we get like 10 weeks into all of this stuff, I think right now, like, what's the point of doing this if you still feel better about a different team? They get to put them in. So I'm going to put Clemson in there. They destroyed NC State. But again, it was CJ Bailey at quarterback. Grayson's out of this one. Smashed up last week. So it's not the same thing. And I think at some point, like, if NC State falls apart here, it won't be thought of as a good win for anybody. But after the opener against Georgia, the Clemson write-off happened. Well, in the conversation of, like, is the Dabo run over based on the expectations that we had for Clemson in this program for so many years? Okay, that's fine. I don't think that's a massive reaction because we've been trending in that direction for multiple seasons. But when you look at the rest of the ACC, where I still think it's Miami's league, writing off Clemson and winning that and then getting the playoff would be a big mistake. And I just felt like, hey, here are all the playmakers, and here's Klubnik like running around a little bit. So they're putting something together there on offense, despite not necessarily being challenged by the opposing quarterback. So anyway, let me transition into Michigan's win at home, because I think there's another Clemson-Michigan argument with this. Like, okay, well, LSU has the best loss against SC because it's neutral field. It's last time, but it's like, I don't know. They were tied with UCLA at home in Baton Rouge. And now Perkins is out for the season with the ACL. It's just awful watching that happen. So, again, I still think LSU is going to be good, but I'm not going to put them 12th. And, again, I think the Michigan loss at home against Texas, is that one still worse than Clemson's loss to Georgia? Because it was still sort of a game at halftime and Clemson's defense looked really good. I don't know. I mean, we're just going to go in circles and everybody's just going to pick whatever they're rooting for. So here's one of my favorite quotes that I had from a financial person on a stock, an investment doing really shitty. And the story was relayed to me. It wasn't something I did, but it was just really funny. And it was like somebody in the room was being criticized for something they had done. And they basically said the data was right, but the results were wrong. That's how I felt about USC Michigan. I really liked SC because of the quarterback situation at Michigan. If Orji was the guy who we saw samples of last year in relief of J.J. McCarthy, and then he loses the job to Warren Davis, who wasn't really doing much on offense for this Michigan team, and then Orji gets to start, like that didn't feel like, hey, Orji finally turned things around. It felt like you just were going to make a change because you knew you needed to. And there was even some defensive stuff with Michigan where you wondered, is this team as good as advertised with some of the personnel, the elite personnel they have at D-line and corner? Well, for a half, it looked like it didn't matter if they ever were going to attempt a pass because they destroyed everything SC was trying to do. SC couldn't block them. You know, Lincoln Riley, he figured, put him down for 28 points at least every single week, and he'll figure something out. The good news for USC is this defense actually looks like it's going to be able to challenge some people, whether you watch the LSU game, Utah State, throw that in there, and then this Michigan contest. Granted, it was pretty one-dimensional against Michigan's offense, but as SC was coming back, I thought, like, this is going to be one of those wins on the road. Nothing's working. You make an adjustment on the offensive line. Moss is maybe more aware of what's going on, and now they're moving the football here a little bit. And this is going to feel like, how did you win this game after a terrible first 30 minutes where you weren't going to be able to figure anything out? Now, Michigan can't do anything. I think they'd had like 28 yards of total offense in the second half before the Mullings run that ended up leading to the game-winning touchdown. But at the same time, like, for all the credit I was willing to give SC for pulling out this tough game that I thought they were going to win, the same needs to be said for Michigan. You can't throw the ball. You're not moving it. They figured out the defense here a little bit, and you still found a way to hang on and win this one at home. The reason I don't have them 12 is that I'm just not going to take a team that seriously until I can see you throw a forward pass. There was a 3rd and 10 play where Orji was so confused against the pass rush where it wasn't like he was sacked immediately and had no chance to get the throw off. He just didn't really know what was going on back there. And at that point, you got to tell him, hey, on 3rd and 10, just throw it. Any one-on-one you see, just throw it, because you're like 30% likely to get a pass interference call on that kind of play. Like some kid will freak out and attack the receiver. Like, just at least get the ball out there a little bit. So that is really concerning. And I just don't know that I can take you seriously when I don't think you're going to get it done on 3rd and 7. Now, Michigan fans could say, didn't a lot of you guys say the same shit with J.J. McCarthy last year? Like, is he really as good as all the other quarterbacks? Well, sort of. But I also think Orji's going 10th in the draft this year, because even as people dug through all the J.J. McCarthy tape, people started to like him more and more prior to the draft. And I don't look, there's always a chance with more experience, more reps, all the stuff, it being his team, that'll get figured out. It's an incredibly tough football type win. Those moments where you're like, hey, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard more series than not. You've got to stay in it. You can't give up. And credit to Michigan for pulling that off, even if I'm going to have some longer term doubts about how their offense is going to stack up against the other contenders in the Big Ten. Okay, final thought. This one I felt good about because after the Tulane game, mentioned a couple times last week, and then watching Tennessee for good chunks this season, all the NC State game, and granted, at some of these Tennessee games, you're going to be turning off at a certain point. You're like, this front for Tennessee is serious, and it has multiple options beyond Pierce, the top 10 projected pick in the draft, at edge. So I talked about it a couple of different times, but it was a very hopeful analysis, I felt like, out of Norman. That even with all the turnover in the O-line and lack of experience, and hey, you're getting a guy back, and like all this stuff's going to kind of figure out. And like, I just hate whenever analysis is based on desire for the thing that's going to make you feel better, hopefully happening. And that's what it felt like. So immediately you're like, this is a problem. The problem that I thought Oklahoma was going to have on the O-line showed up immediately. Here's a stat for you. On the first 23 rushing plays from Oklahoma, they were hit at or behind the line of scrimmage on 16 of them. That really wasn't the entire part of the story, because Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, big-time recruit, he's got the pick that's bad, he's got the fumble, and then ultimately the backward pass, where Venables had said after the game that wasn't even a read, and that backward pass leads to a fumble. There was a little fumble off in this one, same thing as USC and Michigan. But really nothing going right. And then Michael Hawkins, the freshman, comes in at the end of the first half. And I almost felt like that was like a mental reset for Arnold. And then, I don't know if you were watching the game, but Herbstreit and Fowler see Arnold throwing on his helmet as we're getting ready for the second half. And they're thinking the same thing I'm thinking, is like the Hawkins series was a mental reset for Arnold. Like, nope, Arnold's done and he's going to be benched. And I tweeted it out, and people, look, whatever. But I was surprised knowing what the O-line struggles and the likelihood that Arnold was taking all of the reps and was the quarterback. Like, I'm not as locked into Sooners.com as some of you might be, but my educated guess would be, despite the talk of how much better Hawkins was and some of the prep stuff, I doubt this week they were wasting Arnold reps on getting Hawkins ready against Tennessee in this game. The final ends up being a 25-15 game, even though it was 22-3. And I was a little surprised. Like Herb Street said on the broadcast, quote, "This kid's your quarterback." I'm not sitting here telling you Arnold was sneaky better, because he wasn't. He was terrible. And maybe it's some hangover from the pick six against Tulane where that ends up becoming a game again there a little bit. But I just don't like fool's gold series. I think Tennessee could have put up a bigger number if they wanted to. With all the talk about Iamaleava, they didn't really even need him to light it up. And now you're starting to look at that receiver depth where it feels like Heupel and the staff just, hey, guess what? We turn guys into awesome receivers, and then all of a sudden we have all of this depth, and they have it. The running back depth as well. So I don't know if Heupel maybe just looked at the game. It's like, we're not going to lose this, so we'll dial it back a little bit. I don't know if it was out of respect for his history in Norman, but I was in a different category of what felt like, okay, Arnold's done now. Hawkins is the guy because of those series late and putting up a couple scores against a Tennessee team that knew there was zero threat. And it's super frustrating for Sooners fans because you finally feel like you have the defense right. The other part of it is like, hey, who cares? Like, you're still in it. You're still alive for the playoff now. Maybe not, though, because they have Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Bama, and LSU in the rest of the schedule. They're going to play 5 of the currently top 14 projected teams in the AP. So maybe the Sooners aren't going to the playoffs.